We'll call this meeting of the Houston County Planning Commission to order. First item of business is a conditional use hearing. The request made by Steve Halverson, Houston Township, for an existing house on less than 40 acres in an agricultural district.
Read the notice. Please take notice that an application has been made by Steve Halverson, 19059, State 16, Houston, Minnesota, for a conditional use permit for an existing dwelling on less than 40 acres in an ag district in Houston County. Said applicant standing and making application is as fee owner of described lands. A hearing on this application will be held at the Houston County Commissioners Room, City of Caledonia, Minnesota, on Thursday, August 24th, 2017. All persons having an interest in the matter will be given the opportunity to be heard relative to the granting or denying of the application. This was advertised on August 9th. If you recall, last year we amended the ordinance to build a mechanism by which a split that was illegal could allow a house to continue as a permitted use if a certain amount of time passed. In this case, the house was built as a farm dwelling on 40 acres, and then 4 years later a split occurred, taking the house down to 8.5 acres, I believe. The increment of time we settled on last year when we amended the ordinance was 10 years, so he doesn't satisfy that. That makes it an illegal split. The result of that is that permits are withheld. Mr. Halverson's looking for a permit, so in order for him to become eligible for a permit, he first needs to cure the nonconformity. All other aspects of the dwelling are in compliance with the zoning ordinance. There is a feedlot within the required setback for a new dwelling. My interpretation of those rules is that at the time the house was permitted, there was no feedlot setback. This is not a new house now, so that we don't need to, it doesn't apply to him in this instance, and he doesn't need to seek a variance for his house that's been there since 1975 and a feedlot that's been there likely just as long. So really he's just looking to bring the house back into compliance with the ordinance, which is encouraged by the zoning office. Anything you would like to add, Mr. Alverson?
No, I guess that probably about covers it. It did seem strange, and I've talked to Aaron about it. Still have and he's done a very good job of explaining, but it still is, yeah, I'm willing to jump through the hoops, but we bought the house after all this was all said and done, and would like to build a pole type shed on it right now. It seems kind of odd that I need to be the one to correct somebody else's mistake if it was a mistake. So that's the hard thing I have wrapping my head around this, but you know, we'll go by what you guys say, and willing to do it if we absolutely have to.
I think the split was, I think, 2 owners ago, so it's
yeah,
quite removed from the applicant. He's in no way responsible for the nonconformity.
I've had Aaron out, and we've looked at the site, and there's no other issues with any variances, setbacks, anything like that.
So he's looking to build a pole building, but tonight he's just asking for the CUP to bring the site into compliance. If that's granted, then we would administratively issue that permit.
See, we're aware of that issue. We talked at one time about having the Register of Deeds notified that this property doesn't meet with county zoning laws, but we ran into a snag there, didn't we? Because the Register of Deeds wasn't going to hold up a property transaction due to zoning. Was that what we were told? Or?
Well, actually, there's a new state law that would allow us to do that. Should we want to, we would have to opt into doing it. Cities have had that power or authority for some time to review splits. Within the county, when we discussed this among the departments, I don't believe that we want to take that on right now. We prefer to just try to educate the people in the sector. We have prepared a an informational sheet and distributed it to some folks who deal with attorneys and realtors who deal in real estate, it would be easier to correct it that way rather than using the authority that we could take and say we're refusing to record this.
Have we notified the realtors and the bankers?
We've notified some, we haven't notified all, but we attended a professional seminar, I guess I'll call it for lack of a better word, of southeastern Minnesota land use professionals, and we distributed some information there.
What would have been a good way to have you know?
I guess when we bought the house, after going through title search and things like that, that it would have been nice to know that the property is not eligible to, you can't build anything on it. It would have been really nice to know that. I don't know that that would have altered our decision to buy it at that time, because I think we bought it in 1989, if I remember, and didn't have any intention of really building anything on it at that point, but I guess at the time of purchase, it would have been nice to know that you can't do anything more with this. It is as it is.
Well, that was gonna be my question. Should this be caught in a title search? I mean, you get a guaranteed title, would they not be responsible for correcting this? I mean, if it isn't, would make sense to include this in whatever a title search is, that they would recognize this.
I guess I don't know. I would venture that whoever's doing that title search would have to be very familiar with the zoning ordinance to be able to catch on to something like that. I think it's something that's better addressed through just providing information rather than trying to hold things up. There's a lot of timelines you have to adhere to if you're going to try to hold things up. You only have 24 hours to review things. But like Steve says here, if he was aware of it, he may have gone ahead with the purchase, but he likely would have rectified it much earlier before he wanted to do something. And really, I think that's what we're looking for here, is just to correct these things, to make it, if somebody wants to build a new house, they go through the processes if they're going to build on 8 acres. If someone's going to split off a house on land, it seems like it should be a similar process, just so that it's a fair approach we're taking with everyone. Although we did do that 10-year look back, and that seems to be taking care of a lot of them with the old farm homes. I'm glad. I think that's working out well. How we catch all these, we're probably never going to catch every one of them.
Is this just in a split, or is it any non-conforming use? I guess I'm thinking of, there are a number of houses that were allowed, and people wonder how they were allowed.
You mean density requirements? Or?
Well, I know down by La Crescent, there's some houses they say, well, they're more than 1 1/4.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Whether it was legal or done by error, it wasn't a split. Should they as well be correcting their title or their?
I guess if I were to receive the application, I would be looking for that. If they're built prior to zoning, or if the parcel exists prior to zoning, it's then a lot of record, and that density limitation doesn't apply.
Or if they were, allowed in error.
Yeah, I guess that's, a mistake, I suppose, doesn't. For instance, if this were, I believe he actually has received permits prior. Since he owned it, we could have caught it at that point in time. We didn't, but there's no language that allows us, I think, to say, oh, we missed this before, so now it's something we can't regulate. I don't know that exists.
Well, and like I said, what I've seen is people have asked, how did this guy get to build? And I say, hey, it was done before I was involved in this, and I don't know why.
A lot of this is kind of in the vein of the topic we'll move to after his hearing, so perhaps we could pick that up.
Sure, yeah, and sorry to sidetrack it away from your issue.
I just have one question. A lot of those houses close to the city limits of La Crescent? No.
I mean, the ones I'm thinking of are several miles out.
Okay. Well, we're aware of the problem. we're trying to figure out how to address it, how to get the word out, and so I think we did decide that it was going to be with mailing to the lawyers and the bankers and the realtors to make sure they notify, but you're not going to catch everybody.
No.
That does not resolve it for those people from outside the area that didn't get the letter.
Right, if they're dealing with a local realtor, hopefully he'll tell them, but, or notify you, or if you have a realtor representing you, he should be responsible for checking out the zoning, you know.
Yep, yeah, and this was, well, when we bought it, I guess we didn't have a realtor.
Yeah.
We bought it from a private party, so.
Yet another issue as far as you're just dealing with another party. I assume an attorney was involved.
Schultz was, he
Yeah.
did the title search and everything, at the time.
Local attorney should
Yeah,
know.
There probably will be these types of things from time to time. We're not, you know, if we get the information out there, it's going to be moving forward, so it won't take care of things that have already occurred.
It'll prevent it from happening in the future.
Yeah,
Sure, probably good as we can do.
sure. Eric, you want to jump up here just so we can get you on the camera for when we type the minutes up?
I'm Eric Johnson, Houston Township, and when Steve come out to get his permit signed for his pole building, I believe, I thought it was kind of strange why he had to get a CUP for his house. And I've called Aaron, and he's gone through it with me a couple times, but I'm a little slow. It's hard to understand it, but I find it a little unfair, seeing as how it's been 2 winters ago that this happened, and now he has to pay the $500 to get it back in compliance. I would think it should be grandfathered in. It was built in, what, 75?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I know the rules are the rules, but is there any way you could forgive the $500 fee for a CUP? You know, get him back into compliance so then he can get apply for his pole building shed. I don't know if that works out at all, but it's a little unfair given the fact that this happened 2 owners ago. That's all I had to say. It just puzzles me how this works out, and I understand what Aaron explained to me, but it's a little unfair.
If that's not lost on me at all, unfortunately, there's not a mechanism where we can waive that. If we were to do something like that, we'd simply be.
Well, you said that it was brought up before was there anything else built there while you were there that you had to get a CUP?
No, I think that a permit was issued prior, so I guess I was trying to make a point that we make mistakes, we don't catch things.
So in other words, the only way this gets caught is if somebody like him comes up here, then it gets flagged. Otherwise, there's probably a
Unless it
couple
get,
dozen people out there in the same boat, but they're not gonna get paid the $500.
Right.
unless it gets sold and the new buyer checks it out and determines that it's
Right.
not non-conforming.
If it gets reported
If
into the
it's-
deed somehow, like you said, but.
Yeah, but even so, there's buyer beware type thing, you know, I mean, if it isn't, you really need to check out the titles, check out the zoning. There's no vehicle for us to do what you're talking about, Eric, in the ordinance, you know.
And we don't actively enforce these, so the only reason he's going through this is because he wants a permit. Really, the only consequence right
I
now
know
is
that. I know
we won't give you a permit. We won't say you have to do this.
It's just unfair that he has to pay the $500 for something that it wasn't his mistake.
I agree. It doesn't seem like a fair deal, but like Dan says, there's no language to allow us to exercise that kind of discretion.
Well, that's all I had. I didn't want
Thanks.
to make any trouble.
We did try to address this as best we could when we changed the ordinance a year ago with the 10-year deal. There's a lot of properties, you know.
So in other words, it was built in 75, correct?
Yep.
So if it would have been, what, 85 before it was sold off, it would have been okay?
Yeah, according to the change we made last year, that would have made it continue as a permitted use.
The change you made last year, what was the cutoff of that at
It
that time?
just said 10 years from the time of building to the split.
No, but before that, what was the language?
Oh, there was no, the only way to do it before that would have been to go through a
New
CUP.
language that was added.
Yeah,
Tried to alleviate some of the problem, the new language.
I think that should be revisited. Because 75, that's a long time.
yeah.
Yeah. But the law that applies here was in effect in 1973, and this property changed hands in 1975. So it was covered. It was supposed to be 10 acres at that time, and this ended up being 8.5. So it didn't meet the requirements back in 1975 from the ordinance that was adopted in 1973.
It met the requirements when it was built in 75, because it was after that that the split took place. When it
Correct.
sat on 80 acres, there was no problem then.
Right. At the time it split, there should have been a public
At the time
hearing,
it
yeah.
split.
Any other questions?
I guess the only benefit for you, Steve, is that should you sell it, all this is taken care of, and you won't get to the point where somebody's gonna buy it, then they find out, oh wait, I can't build anything on it, so
Yeah.
this part will be done.
Yep.
I don't know if it's worth $500, but.
His example is, when he said there could be a couple of dozen people in the county that have the same situation, they can sell those parcels of property. It's only when they want to add something onto that parcel that they'd have to be meeting the criteria.
That's the way we're handling it
Right.
now. Like, I mean, we
Right.
could go out and actively pursue these, but I don't see that as something we're gonna be doing, so the
No,
only
but-
way we
but
handle them is.
All I'm saying is that the people that are there and own this property, if they want to sell it to somebody, they can. But if somebody wants to make an addition or add on to get a permit, they have to come into compliance.
Correct, yeah.
They can sell the property, he can sell it right now without doing the building, and there's nothing has to be changed unless they want to add something.
But the term for the property, if it doesn't meet, do you call, it's non-conforming, but do you have another word attached to non-conforming, like illegally non-conforming? Or how do you?
Correct.
There's legal non-conforming and
Yeah.
there's illegal non-conforming.
So
right?
that would not be a legal non-conforming, because when
Yeah.
it was created, it was not legal.
See, legal non-conforming would be like our mines that were in existence prior to zoning, but this, you'd have to almost call this an illegal non-conformity.
Well, and I think I'll go back to my title insurance. I think, I granted it'd be difficult to find that, but I would guess that the title insurance says I will ensure that there's no negative against this property. But
Yeah.
that's not your decision.
Right, and we don't have title insurance back in
Oh,
'89
okay.
when we bought it. That was rarely done. It was a title search at the time.
Okay, yeah.
So,
And when they do the search, if it isn't recorded in the courthouse, they aren't going to find it.
Yeah, that's the point.
That's the problem. If we don't require that it's recorded at the courthouse, the title search isn't going to show it up.
Yeah, so that's a step that can be debated if we want to take that
Yeah.
step. I don't know. You know. But Aaron's point is that it may hold up some financial, some land transfers and so forth, There's a lot of things involved when you start mandating that.
We wouldn't be able to, the reviews have to happen within 24 hours. We don't have the staff to do that right now, and I don't think we have the appetite and some of the other departments that would be involved to turn the folks away. It has to happen kind of upstream from there, and that by the time people show up and have the deeds signed and want to record them, things are already signed.
A lot of money's changed hands and everything by then.
Yeah,
Just a curiosity question, when I read this, the property was an 80-acre parcel that had a house built on it. 80, it says here is 80.
yeah, I mean,
Then it was split, and there was 70 acres sold, which leaves 10. Now we're talking 8.5. Where'd the other acre and a half go?
that's something I've wondered things about for bringing that up. And looking back in the abstract and stuff, I wasn't real sharp, but I thought, that doesn't make sense. How did that all happen? Where did it go?
would that be good question. I would venture that perhaps that's where State 16 is.
Yeah, the road right away is included in there, isn't it?
It is in his 8.5, yes.
It's
But it's-
included in
It
your
is
8.5.
included in the 8.5, yes.
But it says approximately 70 acres are sold. Doesn't
Yeah,
say
that's
exactly.
probably, I may have been
Okay.
just
So it
approximating.
was 71.5 acres
It
sold,
could have
he
been,
got
yeah.
8.5.
Too bad the approximation didn't end up on your side.
Yeah.
In fact, I guess I'll add, since you're paying some fees here for things you had no responsibility for, that your acreage seems to be a little bit overstated in terms of the 8.5 doesn't actually seem to be there if you measure it out, so you may want to look at that.
According to this, it says 7.66.
Yeah, I guess I would just suggest you may want to look at how many, the actual area of it, and then see what you're being taxed at. And if there's a discrepancy there, you can get that straightened out. It might work in your favor.
Now, this question would be for you, Aaron. I just want to clarify, you said there's, in their findings here, that there's 2 dwellings in the quarter section. And the second house was rebuilt in 2004, is that correct?
Let me just take a look. Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And they received a permit for the new dwelling?
Well, my assumption was that it's the continuation of a legal non-conforming and that the original dwelling was likely prior to 67, so it would have been what we call legal non-conforming.
Okay.
So those can continue but not expand. And I think the file didn't clearly indicate that, but it suggested that that's what they were doing.
Well, then it can be replaced as well.
Replaced in kind, yeah.
Any other comments? Aaron, do you want to go through your findings?
Sure. Got proposed findings in the staff reports that were distributed to you and in the copy available to the public. If there's no objections, I would offer that we accept the findings as written.
Do we need a motion to accept that?
I don't think so. There's
Okay.
no objections. We have in the past, I guess, I'm sorry, yes, we do.
I'll make a motion to accept the finding as presented.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Should the planning commission decide to grant the permit, staff recommends the following condition: that permittees shall comply with all federal, state, and local laws and regulations. Could you have a motion to grant or deny?
I'll make a motion to grant the conditional use permit with that, to include that recommendation.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
So why don't you tell them, it goes to county board?
Steve, this will go to the county board in the next 2 weeks, on the 5th. And then shortly thereafter, I'll be in touch with you and we can move forward with your
Okay,
permit.
do I need to be at the,
You do not, no,
September
it would
5th
be, much more brief than this.
okay, sounds good, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a dangerous comment, Aaron.
Yeah.
Much more brief than that.
So I had invited in a property owner to discuss an issue that is making me scratch my head, I guess. So I said I'd run it by you folks. He is not here, but I'd still like to discuss it if you're all willing. Grab one of
Do you
these.
anticipate he's going to be coming, or?
I don't know at this point. He might not. This has to do with the density, 1 per quarter as well.
All right. Thank you.
Right, so this is landowner Grant Olson. And he's got a farmstead here in the northeast of the Northwest.
What parcel number?
It's that 200, that blue in the right in the middle.
Yeah, 11040-2000. Kind of right in the little green area. You can't really see the farmstead too well. It's in the green area on the bottom of the floodplain, right below Mount Prairie, right where it says Mount Prairie.
So how much total land? He owns a quarter there? No, he owns what?
He owns about 120 acres there.
Okay.
And then you see in the bottom of that quarter section, there's about a 5 acre in the southwest.
Right. And
There's a
that's
house there as well.
over 3,000.
Yeah. This split occurred, it's not a lot of record, the split occurred in 75. The CUP was issued in 75 for the house on that 5 acres. Now in 2002, the ordinance was amended to include the density limitation on farm dwellings. Prior to that, there was only a density limitation on non-farm dwellings. So up until that point in time, I guess this would have been fine because you would have had 1 non-farm dwelling in this quarter and then 1 farm dwelling. 2002, it switched to 1 farm dwelling as well, so 1 house per quarter. The house now is in poor condition. He would like to demolish it, but he still keeps cattle there. So he needs to have a building that can keep the pipes from freezing. He's thinking about a garage. However, he doesn't want to extinguish his right to replace a legal nonconformity in kind in the future. It's a trickier issue because these both existed before the 2002 limitations were in place. And I think this specific example really serves to highlight a situation you could also say is not really fair when you have somebody owning 35 acres of the quarter, somebody owning 5, and the housing, the building rights being used up by the smaller landowner. Now, we're first come, first serve is how we do that we don't look at acreage. It could be 1 acre and 39 acres, and that would be allowable if it's first come, first serve. But I guess this is perhaps food for thought if you want to tweak something in the future, or I guess I'd be interested in opinions or suggestions on how any ideas how this could be handled under the current rules.
Does he live there? No.
He does not live there, no.
So this is a vacant farmstead?
Yeah, I'm not sure how long it's been vacant, so we haven't crossed that bridge yet. There would be a time frame that if it were vacant for a certain length of time, he may have already abandoned those non-conforming rights.
So Grant and I talked at length about this. And the problem that he had was the building's old. He'd like to tear it down because of the fact that it's kind of a hazard. Do you tear it down, but then if you don't rebuild in a certain amount of time, you've lost your right to rebuild on it, but he's like, I don't want to build on it right now, but maybe down the road, so how do you do that? I think, Aaron, we even talked about it at one point, but, is it something going back on where this house is not, prime agricultural land by any means, going forward, is that something that we need to look at? The whole one house per quarter, if it's on a side hill or something that, can't be utilized. I understand that the 1 per quarter to save on the agricultural land, I support that. However, how many times have we come up where it's, this farmer had this spot and there's this wooded land, he's not using it, it's on a side hill, somebody wants to buy it for a building lot. How, is that a way to handle it? I don't know, but it was brought up that, does that need to be looked at as far as, soil conditions, usage, that kind of stuff, if there's exemptions to preserve the ag land, but yet still allow something to happen. The other thing was too, as far as a dwelling goes, the problem, you couldn't knock it down and let it sit for 60 years and go, oh yeah, this was a building 60 years ago. So how long do you hold on to it? Should it be a little bit longer length of time than we currently allow for instances like this? Or, those are all the questions that got brought up that I guess we'll have to kind of shake out and see.
What is the time frame?
Under the current rules right now, it says that if the house is not occupied, or to remain a dwelling, it has to be occupied, have been occupied for 8 of the last 10 years residentially. So it could be seasonally residentially, but it can't be abandoned for 10 years, and you cannot continue that as a dwelling at that
To
point
be
in time.
considered a dwelling?
Right.
Now, if he tore it down to replace in kind, how soon does he have to do that? Replace it?
I believe 9 months under our ordinance, that if you discontinue a legal non-conforming use, you would need to at least pull the permits within 9 months under our ordinance.
So you've got two issues here, really. You got one, you're talking about the density per quarter, that's one issue. The second issue is, does his non-conforming status continue, and for how long?
Yeah.
Our ordinance right now says it has to be occupied 8 of the last 10 years.
Right.
And if it's been vacant, he may have already
Yeah.
lost his
Already passed.
right to.
Does Beacon have that on there?
What's that?
Does Beacon have the recording? How they record the transactions.
Yeah, it shows the owner, yeah.
Yeah. Just curious now where.
Well, I don't know if it gives a date, does it? It gives who the owner is, no.
I guess that's what I was
Yeah,
wondering.
yeah, I
It
don't
will show transaction.
But does it show the date of the transaction? It does.
Yeah.
We left that
Would it-
open-ended, though, in terms of occupancy, because they could demonstrate it to us in a way that we felt was satisfactory. Yeah, 'cause-
You mean previous to that?
No, on the other parcel,
Corner on this.
on the 5 acres.
I don't know. I'll try and look it up here. Unless anybody else got a computer faster than this, I can.
No. Aaron,
But you're checking into how long it's been vacant now. He hasn't been living there for some time now.
I don't think he's ever lived there.
Has anybody lived there?
Somebody lived there at some point. I've been down there. It's not. It could be lived in, I suppose. There's probably worse houses that are occupied. I think this more so, rather than the focus being the continuation of legal nonconformity, I think this illustrates perhaps a flaw in the 1 per quarter.
Well, yeah, that's a separate issue then.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
we have-
really what I was getting at for this conversation.
We have a lot of that in Crescent Township, because I think we've got 4 or 5 farms that make their living farming. And the rest are urban or work in town, whatever.
Here,
Like
take.
that.
Oh, sorry. I'm talking over here.
Like I said, 4, within the township, I think there are 4 or 5 farmers that are professional farmers and make their living. And that 1 per quarter hits us all the time.
Eric, to answer your question, Bernard Windschittle, do you know who that is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just looking at this parcel, that's a good use of that land where that farmstead is sitting for a house. I mean, that's not a bad idea, to keep it as a place where somebody could build sometime, I mean, because that's definitely not ag land over there. You know what
Well,
I'm
it's a
saying?
lot of acreage down there, but
But I mean, where that green-
it's
where
all
the green-
floodplain to the north. So,
Okay.
yeah, the only
Isn't there
buildable.
already a provision in the ordinance saying that, so we changed something, if I remember right, that even though it might be considered ag land as far as soil type, but if it's a wood chunk or this issue, like where there already was a house, that you could still build on that?
We changed it that if it hadn't been farmed for 10 years, you could build on. That was with soil classifications, like class 1, 2, 3, and 4. You could build on class 1
So this
soil.
is a different situation.
A little different, yeah.
But that would be like woods would qualify then because it hasn't been
It hadn't been
farmed.
farmed,
So.
yeah. We tried to ease that up a little bit, where somebody found a parcel, but it didn't deal with 1 dwelling per quarter. It just dealt with freeing up the soil types a little bit.
I know that Fillmore County is now looking at their regs in terms of density. They're 2 per quarter. Winona County doesn't have a density limitation. It's 40 acres is a permitted use, less than 40 is a CUP, but there's no limitation per quarter or anything of that nature. So I guess something to think about.
Yeah, I think that to explore that, you'd really have to have a lot of meetings with the townships, and a lot of meetings, you have to have a lot of input. I know that there's some parts of the county people want to do that, and other parts of the county people don't want to do that.
Yep.
Probably the better the ag land is, that's probably more where you don't want it.
Yeah, down by Freeburg, more of them want to do it.
Right. And your slope requirements and all the driveway stuff still comes in, you can't just go throw a house up on a hillside anyway, I mean, you still have to have a decent lot, you know, that.
Yeah, the fine line you have to walk to hit the soil requirements for, say, under 40 acres and still be in line with the slopes.
Right.
You know, it limits what's available.
But it's good to have people living in the country too, I mean, it's a thing you don't want to discourage entirely either.
Right. Well, I don't think we need to dwell on this, but I wanted to.
So
Yes,
what,
yes.
he wants to be able to tear it down and rebuild when he chooses?
Right.
Is that true?
I don't think he even wants to. I think he's looking for building rights, perhaps for a son or daughter someday. It's
Yeah.
just
That's
it's
one
a lot of
thing.
land there to not be able to build a house. Is his point.
He just doesn't want to lose his option to be building that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think his big thing too, he said, I don't plan on building a house, but what if someday, you know, a kid wants to be there, or you want to sell it, or, you know, it's all of a sudden it's like, well, now you can't build on it, now you kind of almost devalued your own property. You know, if that makes sense, it's not
But,
even a buildable site, I don't know.
But it was probably devalued when that permit was granted to the other guy.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, he
Tracy
could've-
looked at that.
Well, at that point in time, it could have been rebuilt, though.
What's that?
It could have been rebuilt up
Yeah,
until
that's-
2002. He could have
that's
rebuilt
right.
it.
Yeah, that's right, because he is a legal non-conforming, yeah. But
Is
if
he
he's
illegal non-conforming if
What's
he
that?
hasn't lived there?
no, not that, if it's been vacant.
If
Depending
it's
on what-
vacant,
If
that
he's had somebody
eliminates
there
it.
within the last 8 years, you could rebuild it, no problem.
I mean, 8 of the last
8
10.
out of the last 10.
Right.
Yeah.
8 of the last 10. only.
Didn't sound like he's ever lived there.
Yeah, but he just bought this, and I don't know how long ago he bought it. You don't know, Eric, do you?
Is this the one down at Carlson's, or is this the,
Carlson Drive down there?
Yeah.
Yep.
we bought that one?
Did he? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
We don't know
It
how
might
long.
be a moot point if you're saying 8 out of 10.
Yeah, it's already, he may have already lost his status.
Yeah.
Not to say that the ordinances are not too restrictive already as far as the type of land that you're talking about. That's non-farmable, but would still make a residential.
Well, couldn't he get under not farm for the last, how many years is that? 10?
That wouldn't apply to him because he owns 120 acres. That only applies to under 40. So if you own over 40, we don't restrict. You can build on whatever land you want.
As
Well,
long
but
as
this,
there's no
this,
other house.
this
in-
parcel is
Right.
less than 40, right?
Right, but he owns more land, but we're talking just about that quarter. There's already a house in there, so
How'd that other house?
it was there prior to zoning, is that what you're saying?
No, it got a CUP in 70.
Oh, because it was
75.
non-farm and farm were two different items at that time.
Yeah.
Changed it.
I think
How
that's
do you
what-
call it, a non-farm or a farm? It got changed back there somewhere in the 80s.
So when that got changed, it could just be 1 per quarter of anything.
in
At the
2000.
time
Two,
that cup
yeah.
was granted to that guy, you could have 2 homes on there. One was farm and the other was non-farm.
But then,
But then later it got changed to no, just
Just
one
one
house per
per
quarter, yeah.
Are
But
we-
this would have been non-conforming, legal non-conforming for Wilson to go ahead, but he may have lost his non-conforming status because he vacated the property and nobody's been living there.
Well, he's rented it out, but I don't know how. you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, what is that? I mean, if he said, oh, I go down there and live in the spring, I mean,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't
it
know
looked
how
like
hard-
it could have been lived in if you had some electric bills or something of that nature. You know, that's kind of why we didn't specify what it had to be, because it might be different in
We're
different.
guessing right now, we don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
If he has a well there, he's got electric.
Oh, right, but I guess if it's, I don't, we could do it case by case, and the board can make a decision.
But I think the whole point, and I know Aaron and I have talked about it, Grant and I have talked about it, just prime example of what do you do?
Well, right now, he's gotta build somewhere else, like over on the other part, where he's got plenty of land. Unless we change the ordinance. And that should be thoroughly researched and debated and researched if we're gonna do that. But a lot of people feel strongly both ways on that one.
So when you look at the picture, is the house the little tiny square that's below the U? Or where is the house? Because there's buildings underneath the M and the O. Where is the house? Which quarter is it in?
It's in the northeast of the northwest, and yeah, and indeed the line there actually, there was a section line shift, so the line moved 16 feet. It's really close, but I don't know that there would be enough room on the what in that quarter to the south, the southeast to the southwest for the house. Maybe there would be. Because of the floodplain is what's pushing you south.
Well, I was gonna say, them other houses are in the floodplain, is that not right?
Yeah, those are, all these buildings are probably before
Is that
zoning.
what the green means? That's floodplain? Is that what you got there?
Well, the green means it's coming out of the floodplain, but the white that's north of there, that means that's floodplain.
Well, that one looks
What
like a
white?
barn.
There's kind of a white overlay up from the green and then white.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I assume the red was the red was the floodplain. What's the red then?
Red are areas that are being added to the floodplain.
Okay.
Well, at a bare minimum, he better not tear it down, I would say. Maybe he has somebody live there periodically.
Well, I think we should review the ordinances too.
Have a common sense clause.
Now, this government, you can't do that.
Two relatives.
Yeah, who's common
Who's gonna
sense?
agree on whose common sense?
Well, it's an old farm dwelling that's it's been there forever. You should be able to build another house on it, in the same spot.
Not arguing
It's an
that.
old farm. Common sense tells you that that should be allowed to have another house on it. It's been there forever.
Depends on how the property's split up, though. I mean, you could theoretically split up a quarter and have 4 or 5 houses on it if there were, used to be 4 or 5, used to be a lot denser, you know. I mean, you have to nail it down,
Well, yeah.
yeah. You have to be, no matter how you write the ordinance, it's not gonna fit everybody.
Yeah. Should we jump to
Yeah.
these amendments? Yeah, why don't you go ahead and minutes.
We have the minutes of the May 18th meeting, subject to our approval.
I would move to approve the minutes.
I'd second that.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of the May 18th, 2017 meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, Aaron.
Any questions on the permits?
A lot of them.
A lot of permits, yeah.
Oh gosh, Travis Kingsley, Sheldon Township, is there a existing house that's coming down to build that one?
Let me kind of look at yours.
Yeah. You need this or you need this one?
Excuse me?
No, you need this one.
Oh,
This one?
so you're asking about Travis's place?
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. So it's getting built right next to his current house, and then that'll come down when the building goes up, yeah.
Takes care of the quarter.
There was discussion about driveway and whatnot involving that.
In his, because of that other driveway going
Because of
back
the
to
other
the other
driveway
cabin
that's
there.
split, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, did that answer your, was Justin able to answer your question there?
Yeah.
Is Abrahamson building out in the valley then, or? William Abrahamson, Jefferson Township?
He got that permit a long time ago, didn't he?
I know he had to come back and renew it.
Oh, and he did do a septic. Okay, so yes, we
He came in by May 1 and got it by your deadline, and
we granted, or we extended his deadline because of frozen ground and septics, and I guess he
so then it was
satisfied.
May or something, but he came in then by the deadline, and
Yeah, he contacted a septic provider, and we verified that, so I don't think the work was actually done, but he was making the,
In the process.
in the process.
He's got to drill a well and everything down there.
He's got what?
He has to drill a well and everything there too then?
We don't require a well for a
That's what I
dwelling.
was wondering, because that came up at our township meeting too, that the well is not, I thought with that one in Brownsville, we required a well,
We require septic, but
not the
you
well.
could bring in water, I guess, if you
Okay,
wanted to. We don't.
That was what I was wondering, because
Yeah.
I thought there was something in that one in Brownsville that they had to update their well or something.
so what's his new timeline?
He has his permit, so he has to get it started within that year.
Within a year now, but okay.
Do you know really?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, he was granted a cup, nothing happened. Then we extended the deadline. Then he got another permit now, but now a new deadline starts for him?
He never got his permits till now for the house.
Okay, but he's supposed to apply and start construction a certain time after he gets his
He
cup.
got his permit, so he has a year from the date of his permit to get it started.
But he didn't get started.
Well, he just got his permit, so he has a year from, he just got his zoning permit, so he has a year from I don't know what the date on the zoning permit was, probably about 2 months ago, they got the permit.
But his time span to start building had already expired back in December or January. That's why we gave him an
Well,
extended time.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of the cup.
If I recall, he came in the day before the deadline and said,
Okay.
I'm working with this septic provider. We called and verified that, yeah, he indeed had made contact. Then he told us that because of the frozen ground, I needed a new deadline, and we extended it to sometime in the spring, and I think he came in, right at the,
Okay. All right. But now there's a new deadline looming out there somewhere?
well, anytime we issue a zoning permit, that has to commence within 12 months.
Okay, all right. All right.
Any other discussion? So the motion was made and seconded to approve. Did we vote on that? No. So, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
I just, the last time we didn't approve these, did we?
Just for,
Yeah, I
Don't have
guess-
to? All right. Well, there we
It was
just
fun.
did something we didn't have to do. All right. Moving on.
Save that.
One extra motion.
Let's save it for something else.
Yeah.
Put that in our pocket.
You're going to Board of Adjustments then, Aaron?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you recall, I guess if Larry, you recall, we go through two sets of findings recently in our Board of Adjustment meetings. It's because the state of Minnesota by statute changed the criteria that you had to go through, but we had different criteria that still remained in our ordinance. So this is essentially just bring our ordinance into line with what the state now says are the criteria. Very similar criteria to what we had before. Some of the differences that are striking to me or that are beneficial to me from my perspective, I think are, if you recall, there was a provision before that said, is it a substantial reduction? That was always kind of a tricky one to deal with. That's no longer part of it. So the new criteria would be the following: that the variance request is in harmony with the intent and the purpose of the official controls. There are practical difficulties in complying with the official controls, and the proposed use of the property is reasonable, and economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. 3, The variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. 4, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. 5, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance, and the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty is sought. And 6, the request is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district, permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. So this change will shorten up our Board of Adjustment meetings because we went through all these ones before and all of our old ones. And I guess we restated some before too. There was a little bit of house cleaning that went on here, as well as just changing the conditions that are required.
So just one question.
Sure.
On number 3, when it says the variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property, then it says, and not created by the property owner. So anything the property owner is asking to do, he or she has created.
Right, there's,
I mean, it seems a little ambiguous to,
it's tricky if someone is proposing a shed of a certain size, the shed could always become smaller to get a larger setback. There's some leniency in there. Other counties, I've talked to other counties, they view things done by prior owners as not disqualifying under this criteria. I think it's up to the discretion of the Board of Adjustment and how strict or lenient they want to be in their interpretation of that requirement.
but anytime you request a variance, it's because you're wanting to do something, so you've created the need for the variance.
Right.
If you can't do something without a variance, you've created the need.
Yeah, that's a good,
Actually, it says all it needs to if you just stop the property and threw the
Yeah.
rest of it off.
Yeah, but what if a guy's got 3 acres and he wants to build the shed, and it goes into the setback area, and he wants it over here because he wants a playhouse over here, or wants a playground over here? Well, that's something that he's doing that makes it necessary to go over here. I mean, he could move that shed back over there. I mean,
Put the shed where the playground is, and the playground doesn't need a variance, because
yeah,
that's a separate.
I mean, if he's asking for a variance because it's something that he's doing on his property, that probably needs to be in there, it needs to be looked at. I mean, there's, maybe he needs to have it there, but maybe he doesn't.
that's the example that lawyers who train always use. Is it because you put a swimming pool here? And is that why you need your variance for your garage? That would disqualify under this. I don't believe, though, we have the discretion to modify this much. And
Okay,
that-
it's just a
Also,
question, because
these are-
anything
these are
that
state
requires
deals.
variances.
Right.
This came from the state.
And we're at discretion though, right? I mean, he could still get the variance even though he already put his pool in? Or is this a real black and white?
I think the Board of Adjustment has discretion as long as they provide the rationale for what they're doing.
Yeah, okay,
How about if you put, and not able to be alleviated by any other means?
Okay.
Just a thought.
Yeah, we can, and that type of thing we certainly can do.
And one of the things I've always struggled with is, he bought the property knowing this was an issue. Was that his, probably that's why it was as cheap as it was, or whatever. Is that not caused by him?
one example, the expansion of the feedlot outside of Houston. He bought the property knowing there could be X number of animal units, and then came to get a variance to add more animal units, which would have been something that he knew what he had. I'm not saying he shouldn't have given it that. I'm just saying that's where the discretion kind of has to come in.
Has to come in, yeah.
Well, and I think the discretion in that example had everything to do with where it was. If he was out in the middle of the country, that would have been not an issue. And that's what I think the board needs to look at is, how is this going to affect people? If it's, if you're looking for a 90% variance, it's very different if you're looking for a 10 or 15% variance. And if that's an empty lot there next to it, that's different than if there's a house there and there's a garage on this side. Or if there's a bedroom on if you're looking for a variance, you want to be 5 feet from the boundary line and it's right next to a bedroom, that's very different than if it's right next to a garage.
So you're saying is like when we grant 1,300-foot variances for a 1,500-foot for like a manure pit because it's in the middle of nowhere
Yeah.
versus.
Yeah, if it's out in the middle of nowhere, that isn't a big deal.
It's in the
Except
middle of
that
nowhere.
if you grant it, if somebody's living there, only 200 feet away now from a manure pit, it is a big deal.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, but he said out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
And there
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
be,
somebody has to be there to need a variance.
to require the
If
variance.
nobody's there, you don't need a variance.
Anyhow, but I think that's the difference, the percentage that you're looking for and
Yeah.
how it's gonna affect the area where
But-
the variance is.
But now here's the question though. Under number 3, could you grant that 1,300-foot for the 1,500-foot variance for manure storage pit? Because technically, like you're saying, well, then just make your pit smaller or move it. I mean,
Yeah.
you're really tying the hands for the guy that really needs it that, well, there's really nothing there. Why, or it's far enough away. Does that tie that up now?
Well, we debated that at length on a recent application here.
Yeah.
And the landowner convinced us that there were special circumstances of why he needed that. But you could have, that was a legitimate argument to make.
True.
And we asked him, we pressed him hard on that issue. But he really argued that it had to be where it is because of elevations and pumping
One of the
and traffic.
contributing factors on that was the adjoining property owners did not have a problem
Object.
with it. They
Yeah,
did not
didn't
object.
See, so there has to be some discretionary room here. But I think this is good language, the way it is, because it gives it really forces a conversation with the applicant, is what it does.
And
I'm okay with the first half of the sentence. What I have a problem with, and not created by the property owner, because anything you do is created by the property owner.
Right, but
Okay.
you have to look at the reasons and the rationale.
Right.
If you go with that, you have to have your reasons why you go with it, or if you go against it,
Right.
you have to have your reasons. That's why in this case we're talking about, we interviewed him extensively
Right.
and came up with the reasons to go with it.
And that's the special conditions or conditions unique to the property.
But now, what about if it said something in there along unique to the property and not intentionally created? If you're doing it like, well, I'm going to put the barn here so I can put the pool there, or put the pool there. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if you intentionally do it to try and manipulate the system, I can understand. If it was like, well, the pool was there, we didn't really intend on this happening. Because then it comes back to the, like Eric was saying, a common sense, like, well, it wasn't. Does it give you a little room for discretion if you need it?
I think that would-
Or maybe we don't want that discretion, I don't know.
it still is pretty subjective.
Yeah.
And I think that it's probably okay the way it's written.
Sure.
Because it forces the conversation.
Yeah.
And then during the conversation is where you're going to get your reasons to approve or not approve it.
That's a good point. Like you said, it
Yeah.
forces a conversation. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there has to be some discretion.
Oh, I understand that.
Yeah. But I think it needs to be there.
But if somebody comes back that's adjoining property and wants to argue the case, this was created by the property owner.
He needs to do it at the public hearing.
What if he comes to the public hearing, argues the case, and it's still granted?
If the board has facts for granting it, it'll hold up.
But now here's the question though, playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Okay, so you bring it in and say, yep, this is my reason. the Board of Adjustments is granted, and then they go, all right, we're gonna see you in court, is the court gonna look at this and go, it was intentional, it's out, and then it's kind of like, you know, what I mean, is there a way to avoid,
Yeah.
That's all.
because you're
Well,
gonna
that's all.
lose at that point, because like
I
you said.
don't,
the
I don't
judge
have
could
any
go
problem
out.
with the first half of the sentence, it's just that last half created by the property.
Well,
Why does that last half have to be there?
That's all.
I mean, it's silly.
We know that the applicant has created the situation, but
Well,
just,
but again,
all right.
if I decide to put a swing set here, but I want to build my shed right next to my neighbor's property, that's something that I did to create the problem, you know? And so, I mean, it's in there. I mean, if you take that language out, then my swing set takes precedence over my neighbor's setback, you know?
I like my substitute language.
Huh?
I like that language I have.
What?
Say it again.
And
Yeah,
not
say
able
that.
to be alleviated in any other manner. So you can move the swings, if you can, you know, that's a way you could alleviate the situation, if you move
Isn't
something and
Well, we
change it
have
around.
that, though.
isn't
Number
that in
4
there already?
says
What is that?
something along those lines. I'm sorry.
Variance
no.
cannot be alleviated by
5.
reasonable
Well, there-
method, number 5.
Five is exactly that, isn't it?
So, you know, I think one of the examples is if a person wants to build a garage and wants to build a 2-car garage or whatever, but there's a septic in the way.
Yeah, that's,
And then he needs to, in order to build this garage, he has to get a little, you know, can't be the required number of feet from the property line. That's not something he created,
See, that's where it comes back, is technically you created it by putting a septic there, not on the other side of the house.
he didn't, he bought the property.
but he-
Somebody put it there because it was a good reason to put it there.
Yeah.
It perked, it did everything worked. And now he wants to build a garage, and it's reasonable that he could have a variance. If he wants, what is it in the ag, it's 50 feet?
Yeah.
So if he wants to build it at 49, and I don't think so. If he wants to build it at 45, that makes sense.
What you're essentially saying is, if the property owner creates it for the purpose of facilitating the variance, that's the
Yes,
problem.
yes.
If they're creating it
Yeah.
for another reason, then maybe it's okay.
Yeah.
It's really tough to be able to drill down and determine someone's intent often. I think that's why this kind of leaves it gray, so the Board of Adjustment has to exercise their
and you have to have
opinion.
some
And
discretion.
Did you put the septic there because you knew you were gonna build a shed in 10 years and wanted to put it there? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, and that's what falls with the board.
Well, it goes
when
to
does
Larry's
decisions.
example, if the guy bought the property and that's the way it was,
Yeah, then
and
obviously
he
not.
wants to build a garage, if you can't build a garage because the septic is here, and you don't have room for it, you don't have room for it.
But then, like Dan's saying though, I can see this, it does trigger the conversation. The variant, the Board of Adjustment's there to say, yeah, it's reasonable, we'll give it to you. Do you leave it just to trigger the conversation, or? Yeah, I mean, I can see both sides of this argument, is what I'm getting at. I mean, it's a,
plus moving a septic would qualify as a practical difficulty.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that would be a practical difficulty, therefore, I mean, you have to use some judgment.
right.
Move a swing set or move a sewer system, you know, I mean,
That's why we
that's
could-
where the Board of Adjustment comes in.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's their job, right?
Yeah.
Actually, could you move the numbers around and put 5 up where 4 is, because that follows the number 3 a lot better than number 4.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
If you were doing things like in order,
It kind of, the thought process
Yep,
kind of
yep.
followed down, and that kind of applies to the same thing as the one preceding it. Then on number 6, would you have to put something in there about state and also local laws too, because it says something about standards lower than those required by state law and local ordinance? Does that need to be in there too?
Give me 1 second.
Isn't that, as it relates to the floodplain?
Yeah, or whatever, any, well, it's not allowed in the zoning district, I guess, is in there.
That sentence just refers to the floodplain,
I
like you
guess it
can't
does.
build in the
Yep.
floodplain.
Yeah, the state's the ones that have the floodplain laws.
We don't, the county doesn't have it.
No.
So the first suggestion you had, Ed, was switch the order of 4 and 5.
Right.
And then secondly, you're looking at 6?
Not actually, after we discussed it here, no.
I can get some feedback. I'm going to recommend that we continue all these at our next hearing because the other 2 sections are been conditionally or preliminarily approved by both Bowser and the DNR respectively. I want to get their final approval before we take final action because we don't want to have to go change something if they say that should be shall and not may. We don't want to have to re-advertise and go through the whole process. And I think it might be easier to do these all at the same time rather than take just the Board of Adjustment one through the whole process and then let these go. I could ask Sam and maybe Attorney Squires for some more input on the created by the owner language and see what.
Everybody seems okay with it.
Squires and Mankato and his partner, I can't remember what his name was, and they were the ones who jumped on number 3 and said, if you put a building up and now you want to do this over here, you created the problem.
Yeah.
So they gave the impression that, you don't get the variance, which I don't know about that. That's why I think the Board of Adjustment needs discretion to say, yeah, maybe you did, maybe this is kind of your fault, but, it still is a reasonable request.
As long as you have your reasons for
Yeah,
doing
right.
it.
Well, and let me just say to that too, does that tie somebody's hands if it's just a minimal deal, like, I want to add on to a shed, I want to go 66 feet, it's going to hang over 1 foot on the neighbor's property, his house is on the other side of the section, he has no problem. Are you now setting precedents because somebody's going to come back and say, whoa, you didn't let mine go through, his is over by 1 foot, and you let his go through, and it was a problem he could resolve by making that building a foot smaller.
It's over where?
I'm saying if you had a building,
Yep.
and you have that 50-foot setback from a property line, and you're at 49 feet because of the size of your building.
Yep.
Is that 1 foot a big deal? No. And if the neighbors are like, hey, we got cornfield for the next 60 acres, it doesn't matter, and you grant that, and then somebody else comes in, are they going to try and hang you and say, wait a second, how come I didn't get approved because of this situation when you approved him? And there it says, if he would have reduced his building by 1 foot, it would have been resolved. You let him go. I just don't want to create a, do we need to have some sort of,
Each situation is unique.
It is,
Yeah,
and that's the question.
And you gotta have your findings of fact.
That's
what
right.
it is.
Right. That's
And
right.
That's what'll stand up in court, and anything you do is open to challenge.
right. But does that
that's-
tie your hands from a finding of fact that says like, well,
I don't think so.
But every time you do one, you're up to that, If you give one, you set a precedent, but everyone has to be judged on its own merits. And we've heard time and again, we go to these seminars and they said, if you do this, you do your finding of facts, and you do a reasonable finding of facts, and what you do is reasonable, you will be defended.
well, and that's why I guess I'm bouncing on both sides because I can see both our arguments. But with what you just said, Larry, does that take that sentence out as a moot point? Well, you had your findings of fact to why you did it, and it was reasonable.
The findings,
versus-
they have to be these questions.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is that last sentence, is that too constrictive? Because we say it's your own doings, period, versus, well, but it was reasonable and everything else lined up and cool, it's over by 1 foot, not a big deal. And again, I really don't, I can see both sides,
I
but
think you have to look at the whole picture, like what was said recently before, that, each circumstance is different. Each circumstance has their own findings of fact.
right,
And no 2 situations are going to be the same.
Right.
So comparing the 60-acre cornfield next to the other, as your example stated,
Yep.
that they're totally different.
absolutely.
When you look at it.
That's right, and that's what I guess I'm getting at is it would be totally different, but that one sentence ties them all the same.
Each situation is different, but that sentence says
They're all the same.
they're all the same.
That's right.
What
Yeah,
sentence?
but I like that sentence because it drives
I
the
agree.
conversation.
What's that, number
See,
3?
and that's the point, it does.
Which
but
part
is
of the
is it
sentence,
gonna
which
hang
part
us?
of the sentence do you like?
Number 3?
Number 3, not created by the property owner, that's something that needs to be considered.
So the findings we would have to the board would have to explain why it was or why it was not.
Yeah.
So if it's, they need a building of this size, maybe the board's not gonna focus on the size of the building and say, the hillside comes down in a certain angle and it means that the building has to shift to the east within 47 feet of the property line. That's a finding that would probably hold up. It has to be addressed in here, so the fact that it's in there, I don't think it dooms anyone, it's just if you ignore it. You'd have to explain why it is or why it's not.
Yeah, and I admit it's
The
subjective.
first part of
Yeah,
the
it
sentence
but-
is, I agree with you on the first part of the sentence, that the variance request is due to special conditions, where the hill is, where the property line is, where the septic is, or circumstances unique to the property. There again, the hill or whatever. And it's not created by the owner.
The special condition is I have my swing set here. I want to build my garage over here.
That's a special condition. It's created by the owner.
Right.
Like,
So you have the discretion when you talk about the special conditions unique to the property.
but the
When you
variance
say,
doesn't-
and it's not created by the property owner, everything that's done is created by the property.
That's true, but if you say, yep, you can't build a car there, I mean, you gotta build a one-car garage, you can't have a two-car. That's, if it's within a foot of the neighboring property, that you would make that determination. If there's, like you said, a cornfield there, I think we want to encourage people to keep their things in a shed, in a building. But if if you're gonna say the strict one here, then you might as well not have a variance. If you're gonna take everything right down the line and say, yep, that was caused by him, then you might as well not have the law, because you'd never give a variance.
So,
So remove that part of the sentence.
no, I
You're
think
still
that,
subject to the,
I think that sentence is good because it stops people from doing things saying, I'm just gonna do this, and I'll get a variance and I'll say, well, I did it in good faith and blah, 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 and so I'm gonna kind of abuse the setbacks and this and that.
but
I
the
agree.
question, in the question, though, would still be if somebody, say somebody builds a house with a two-car garage on it, and they say, you know what, I'm gonna make it a three-car garage. In order to make it a three-car garage, it hangs over that setback by just a little bit. Now, do you say, nope, you can't build a three-car garage because it's gonna be over and you're creating the problem? Or do you say, you can build it, no big deal, you're over?
Well, that would be up to the members of the Board of Adjustment and neighbors who would come to testify.
But playing devil's advocate, that says that it is you created the problem by wanting to add a three-car garage on. But if you say, well, there's special conditions. Special condition is my house is there.
Yeah.
I can't go this way. So is it the special condition that is moving it over, or is it that you just want a three-car garage, you just can't put it there? So, and that's what I'm saying, playing the devil's advocate, which one do you fall under? Special condition, the house is there, or, well, yeah, you just can't put a three-car garage because you are creating the problem. Which one holds precedence?
Well, I think if it's a reasonable request, and he can justify why he really needs it, probably the board would grant it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree, and I would think that would be the obvious decision.
Yeah.
But the only problem I've got is if somebody ever challenged that in a court of law, are they gonna come back and say, you created the problem we wanted to add on, you don't have the room, you can't add on?
Yeah, anything you do, again, is open to legal challenge, but that's hypothetical. I don't think
Right.
we've had one challenged on that
Right.
for that reason, but you gotta be careful with that one.
Well, and that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah,
again, playing both sides to make sure we get it right.
I can ask
Yeah.
for some clarity on that, and we can take it
Yeah.
up next month if we want.
Yeah.
want to
Good
have-
idea.
maybe ask if we can remove it, number one, and ask if how we ought to.
The findings come from that are being,
They're from there was a court case, and in 2013, the state of Minnesota legislature amended the variance finding, so that's,
recommended
Yes.
findings.
yeah, but they're not
recommended by the
verbatim, so
legislature.
they're, so I guess I should ask if we could remove that portion of that finding.
Well, and the other thing
Everybody's in
is,
favor of removing it, though. You
I,
can
I
ask-
I
Well, no,
agree
it's an
with it,
option.
what Aaron said, let them check with it, and we'll discuss it at the next meeting. We can go on forever about this.
yes, but the other
It's a
thing
minor
is,
issue.
it's been there forever. That verbiage has been in our ordinance forever, right?
This is new verbiage, so this.
Well, but that.
Something
not-
similar was
not
there.
the- Well, something
Yeah.
very similar, yes.
Yeah.
And I guess let's see how many court cases have been brought against that.
And I understand if it was malicious intent, you know, like, you can't do this knowing that you're creating a problem.
Right.
I guess in that,
Right.
but at the same rate, that's why we have a board of adjustment, they determine.
Your interpretation, Bob, is basically with that language in there, they can't grant any variance.
That's my interpretation. Because whatever they're asking for is created by the person requesting the variance.
Yeah.
But actually, if you read the next, at number 5, that addresses the thing more correctly.
Right.
When, if it can't be alleviated by another method, I mean, that,
Right.
you can use that as like a discussion point that, I kind of like it the way it is now.
Right.
And then.
If you hang your hat on number 3,
If you
number
just-
5 is moot, because the number 3, he created the issue.
It sort of defines it and makes you pinpoint exactly what could have been done or not done by going to that number 5. You know, if there are other alternatives, then you have to use those.
And you have to look at practical difficulties too. What's really involved? Again, are you moving something simple or are you moving? Let's move on.
Let's
Yep.
move forward. We can talk about this all night long. Which one's next, Aaron?
The shoreland,
Okay,
this is the heftier of the two. Rather than tweak our existing, the state's got a new model shoreland here. It works in concert with the buffer model ordinance. It's also easier to read, the parts of it that are applicable to us, than the prior one. However, it has a lot of language for things that are not likely to occur in Houston County, what they want to see in there. A lot of language in here is, I think, geared toward lake country up north. I don't know
So
the best
this
way
is
to.
not the final deal yet or not? Is this approved? I mean,
This is, for the most part, it's approved. The one sticking point that we're debating with the DNR is certificate of compliance. They've got language in their model that says before issuing any permit for anything in shoreline period, that would trigger a septic review. We question that, saying if someone wants a permit for a woodshed on their 80-acre parcel that's a quarter mile away from their house, I don't know that they're going to be enthusiastic about us saying we have to review your septic system in order to get you that permit. So we're having conversations about that right now.
okay.
Otherwise, for the most part, it's been accepted by them.
I had one question on the definitions.
Sure.
Page 143, dwelling site, it says a designated location for residential use by one or more persons using temporary or movable shelter, including camping and recreational vehicle sites. Now, the next item is dwelling unit. Any structure or portion of a structure or other shelter designed as short or long-term living quarters for one or more persons, including rental, timeshare accommodations, such as motel, hotel, resort rooms, and cabins. Now, my question is, why is a dwelling site just considered temporary for temporary or movable shelter? Wouldn't that also include permanent shelters, permanent dwellings?
It's a good question.
It looks like they use dwelling instead of campsite.
You know,
That's why I asked, yeah, I followed that reasoning too, but, you know, if you compare the two definitions, dwelling site to dwelling unit, you know, you'd think that they would include the same, you know, definition for a dwelling.
are they saying that site's essentially an unimproved site, but unit is where you have some sort of real estate improvement?
Okay.
I think
I follow your reasoning there, yeah.
because
Well,
these definitions would only apply to this section of the ordinance.
Right.
And I'm hesitant to tinker with them much because I'm not sure how they're used, and we have to see how
Right.
they're used
Mhm.
moving down.
But are they differentiating because you're saying residential use and here you're saying living quarters? And that's what's setting it apart?
Okay.
Well, I'm saying temporary removable shelter versus any structure. I guess is what I'm looking at. I think dwelling site is like an RV site, sort of, and dwelling unit
Dwelling
is
site is a location. A dwelling,
Unit would be a.
unit
what
is a
you'd put on the
structure.
site.
I mean, so you could
Is that
pull
what
your,
you're trying to get at?
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
could pull
that's
your
true.
RV in, that'd be, well, granted, you'd be living in it, but you're just in that spot. And you can drive it away.
That's a dwelling site.
to another dwelling site.
Location.
Yeah.
I mean, the structure, you're not gonna drive away.
It's kind of strange too that they include motels and hotels in a dwelling unit.
Right.
Up above, they
Right.
got commercial use.
That's what's
They think
really,
Hotels and motels would be
Yeah.
commercial.
it's really focusing on the lake country, I think,
Okay.
where you have that kind of high demand for the shoreland we don't really
Yeah.
experience down here. But I could get some, look into that and get some clarity. That's a good catch, Jim.
So do we notify the DNR now for all public hearings regarding variances and ordinances and in the
In
shoreline?
shoreland, yeah.
We do,
Yep.
okay. Have they ever weighed in on any of our,
A couple times. Often they weigh in after we've already had our hearing.
After the fact.
Yes. I think that, what page are you on right now, Dan?
149?
149?
Notification of DNR.
Is there a time specified?
Well, you're supposed to notify them at least 10 days before the hearing.
So they had wanted us to change that to 30, and we do notify them probably ahead more than 10 days, but I didn't want to put it into the rules that we had to do it 30 or we'd be in violation.
So are you trying to do it 30 days now, or are you just ignoring that?
I'm staying with 10.
We hit the 10, it says 10.
Okay.
We send it out at the same time we send out notifications to newspapers and whatnot, so it's probably more than 10 days, but it may not be 30 days. So we just don't want to create a situation where if we don't happen to hit 30 days, they're going to say, well, you have to have another hearing. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if 10 days is good enough for everybody else, probably good enough for them, huh?
That's what the state law is, yeah, there. We added some new lakes, I guess I asked for a map of where all these lakes are, I'm not familiar with many of them. There's some new lakes that are added to our public waters. And I'm sorry, actually, the new lakes that are added are not in the version you have. But we have Mud Lake, Goose Lake, Minnesota Slough, Hay Shore, Commodore, Elgar, Ice Hall Slough. All
They're down
new.
by New Albany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those lakes.
So like, whoever renamed Lake Calhoun did it.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess I don't know how deep we want to get into this tonight. I would encourage, because of the length of this, if any of you want to come talk to me about something in here, you're more than welcome to.
you comfortable with it? The way it's written?
Well, the one thing, like I said, we're talking with him about is that septic review, and
Yeah, okay.
that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
But the rest of it, yeah.
Popped into my head, what if somebody wanted to put a boathouse up like an ice haul slough? Can they do that?
A boathouse.
You know, like they have Brownsville, what if somebody said, I think I'm gonna put one out here, can they do it?
They would need a permit from somebody beyond
Yeah,
us.
So, I mean,
Is this? is
What's
there
the
any
Corps of Engineers got to say about that?
Yeah.
Well, I thought there was something where they weren't allowing
They
any
don't
more
allow
boathouses.
anymore.
It had to be an existing site, that's why they're getting so
that's why
valuable.
they're only in Brownsville, down by Lawrence Lake's the only place I've ever seen.
Right, right.
And they can't, the footprint can't change.
No, no, no.
That's the Army Corps of Engineers, I think.
So basically, the answer is no,
I would think
can't
so.
do it.
They can't do it with just
I know
our
Brownsville would
permission.
be the Army Corps of Engineers. I don't know about your slough.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
have to,
just popped into my head now for some reason.
Lake in some guy's backyard, sure.
Are we taking action on this or waiting until the next?
I'd like to
meeting?
table this one till the next meeting, make sure we have final approval before we take any action.
Are we moving on to the riparian buffer?
Yeah, that's the same status as the shoreline, that we have
Right.
preliminary approval from Bowser for this. But I think it's prudent to get final approval before we adopt anything or recommend anything.
So is there anything that concerns you as this is written?
Really, the only decisions we had to make in here were how to go about enforcement. So let's go to that page.
196.
Okay, yeah, so on page 86, under enforcement, this came with language that allowed for administrative penalty orders. What we're saying here is that we could do this either through our zoning ordinance, section 10, which would be the criminal enforcement, or we could go with the administrative penalty orders. But probably up to the county attorney, if it came to an enforcement instance, how we would pursue a given violation.
So, the way it reads, the county can, at each case, decide whether they want to go criminally or through administrative penalty?
Right, administrative penalty, there's a lot of timelines that come with that. Criminally, we handle that just like we handle any zoning violation. I guess from my standpoint, we try to work with folks to correct it before we escalate. And then if they don't cooperate in correcting it, then section 10 of the ordinance kicks in. And we certify things as non-compliant, and then the county attorney could bring charges as misdemeanor. Or it could be the APO, which you get a notice of violation, and that puts you on, I guess it provides you notice. A certain amount of time passes, fines start to kick in.
it seems like there's relatively lenient. I mean, the timeline, you get a notification, there's a lot of chances to actually do
Yeah, if you
the
flip
right
over to
thing
the next
before
page, that's the
get to the
APO.
criminal.
After talking within the county and with Bowser and with Soil and Water, we had a range from which we could choose the penalty amounts. We were on the higher end here, and that we want to have it be a deterrent for folks not to try to test or make us go through the APO process. Although the range wasn't very wide, so there's not a lot of discretion.
I guess that raises my question. If I look at, on 187 subdivision 2, and it talks about the violations, on a single parcel that has not previously been subject to $0 for 11 months after the issuance, $200 per parcel per month for the first 6 months, 180 days, and 500. How big is a parcel?
It depends. I mean,
I mean, is it the same price for a guy that's got a 10-acre piece that's in
Yep.
violation.
Right,
As a guy
yes.
that's got a 200 acre piece that's in violation, I mean, the price is the same.
Price
That's
is
the
the same.
question I had, you know, my farm as an example, I got a stream that runs through 4 parcels ranging in size from 6 to 160 acres.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm in violation for each of those parcels, and this comes into effect, that gets expensive.
Well, if you go down, it gets prohibitively
Right.
expensive if you don't come in.
So for each parcel, that falls into place for each parcel then, correct?
Correct, yeah, and the parcel could be 1 acre, it could be 80 acres.
But actually, A gives you $0 for 11 months, so you got most of the year to fix it.
Yes, yeah.
You know, so I mean, that's worth mentioning there.
It would give you a lot of incentive to fix it.
Yeah, that's the whole idea, I think. I mean, you can seed it back down or whatever to comply, I guess.
And
I
I'm sure,
can't say much because I live on a hill, everything drains off, I don't have anything like this, so.
so your problem becomes our problem.
Yeah, pretty much, I send it off.
What's APO stand
Administrative
Penalty order.
Was there any discussion on single parcel versus, you know, a single landowner?
The APO structure comes right from the state, and I think that's in the statute, I believe, that, because we can't, for most of these zoning ordinances, we can't use an APO. I think they give us special permission to use that here.
If you had somebody, if it was only per landowner and they had 5,000 or 6,000 acres, and you're only, maybe I can live with that penalty.
True.
But if you're gonna nail me for each parcel, maybe I better fix them.
That's true.
And there's an advantage to having this come from the state and not the county. They say this was mandated, you know, you can go out there and
Well, it
say-
would be coming from the county though, because we
But by
opted in.
using this framework, it sort of comes from state
It's
guidelines.
based on that.
Yeah, so,
This is probably, I don't think the county is eager to get into a lot of criminal zoning ordinance enforcement cases. I think the intent with this is that the fines become expensive enough that
right.
no one would want to, it wouldn't be worth it to not comply. But hopefully we wouldn't have to actually use it.
So, how does this differ though, like when we're talking about penalties for rock quarries, and we say, well, we really can't do that, because if it goes to court, the judge is probably gonna throw that out anyway and look at it. Is that the same situation here? So if you built up $10,000 worth of fines, and the county says you owe us that much, but if it goes to court, the judge may say, no, it's only 2,000 or whatever. I mean, can the judge overrule that, or?
This doesn't go to court, so once we issue the APO, if you appeal it, you're appealing to the Commissioner Bowser.
Oh, okay.
And then the county doesn't have to handle that at that point in
Oh,
time.
okay, if it's administrative.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's probably, you could probably appeal that decision to a court, I don't know.
So
the
then it
answer.
goes to the Bowser, and then they decide. But where does the proceed, where does the money go? Then the
Money
fine?
goes to the county, from what I understand. That's
Okay.
Sam's.
But Bowser does enforcement.
If they hear the appeal.
They'll hear the appeal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay,
I was just curious about parcel and size.
Yeah, that's a good,
I mean, for 11 months, if you've got a crop in the field or something, you've got 11 months to get that corrected, and seasonally here, that should be easy enough to be effective. And I assume part of that then would be you have to plant something that gives you a permanent turf of some sort in the buffer area.
yeah.
In that
there's-
11-month period.
There's a waiver option. A lot of waivers are coming in that postpones the deadline. And I'm not, soil and water is the department, I guess, or jurisdiction that deems something compliant or non-compliant. I'm not sure if they would view, if you seed it for something perennial, if that, at that point you're compliant.
It's November, but when this takes, when is this? It's November 1st, right?
November 1st, yep.
Yeah.
Right, but the waivers get you to July 1st or thereabouts.
So July 1st, and then it's 11 months? If you're in violation at July 1st, you got 11 months to fix it?
You would, yeah. The- I think the danger.
If you got a waiver.
If you
Yeah,
got
if you
a
get a
waiver.
waiver. The danger, though, is that once you get one APO, or once you get one letter of noncompliance, the next time you get one, you're in a different category where the fines are
The
a lot.
first letter, the second letter comes 11 months later.
Right,
Well,
but
I think they're giving you until July or whenever it was.
Without a waiver, you get your, with or without a waiver, once you have to hit the date, you get the letter of non-compliance, you've got 11 months to come into
Sure,
compliance.
sure.
Before there's any financial penalty.
But then you've had one letter, so then in the future, if for whatever reason you go out of compliance and you get another letter, that kicks you then into the repeat violation category, where the fines are, if the
I don't
APOs
think- I
are.
don't think so.
Where in this process does the waiver come in?
That depends on your situation.
When you
If you
get the
got a
first
special-
letter, you request a waiver?
No, you can only get a waiver depending on your property.
When do you get it?
Not everybody can get a waiver. It depends.
With the people who get it, when do they get it?
They apply beforehand, before November 1.
So like if you're gonna plant CRP, they'll give you a waiver because you can't do it until the spring. So then if you all of a sudden don't put it into that program or something happens, you know what I'm
You
saying?
get the waiver when the initial setup. I see, okay.
But I don't agree with what you said, Aaron. If I have a piece of land and I'm farming right up next to inside the buffer area,
Yep.
and you say you're not in compliance, you're violating the buffer law. So you send me a letter. If I've got no variance from November 1st till October 1st, there's no penalty.
Correct.
Then from October 1st, for the next 6 months, it's $200 per parcel.
Okay,
That's
yep.
not a second letter. That's, if I'm still in violation, you'll send a second letter saying I'm in violation. I pay $200 a month for the next 6 months. Then it's $500 a month for the next 6 months before you get into the $200 per parcel per day.
Okay.
So you've got 11 months, 6 months at 200, 6 months at 500, depends on the size of the parcel. I mean, you got a guy with a big parcel,
Yep.
maybe it's worth it to, go 2 years
I guess I'm looking at a situation
cropping
where.
that, in violation. Depends on prices and all that, I understand, but
If you bring it into, if you don't hit the initial deadline, get a letter, bring it into compliance before the monetary fines actually kick in, and then 2 years later,
I understand,
out.
then you're a repeat violator.
right, that's what I'm,
But if you're in violation, you're not a repeat violator, you're just a continual violator
agree.
until that
Indeed.
next 12 months.
I would think it'd be
Yes.
a separate issue, right? Is what you're kind of getting at? If you were in violation because you didn't plant something there, you have 11 months to get into it. If you plant something there and then you go back and farm it a year later, now you're a repeat.
right.
No, I don't agree. If I'm farming this land and I've got a crop in there,
Yep,
I've got 11 months to get that crop up.
yep,
But from November 1st to October 1st is the time frame. When I get the crop out, I don't do anything with the land. So for the next 6 months, I'm paying $200 a month. But in that time frame, I plant another crop. And I'm still within that first violation because I never fixed it in the first place.
right.
Then I pay $500 a month and take the crop out, and then I seed it down in hay or whatever, alfalfa or whatever. So I'm paying, it's not the repeat violator and paying by the day, you're paying by the month.
Right, and I agree to that. I think it's, if
What
you-
he said, yeah.
Yeah, if you also come into compliance in 5 years, you've been in compliance for 3 years, whatever, and that's done, and you're not paying penalties and you're not doing anything, but you do it again,
Right.
you'd be a repeat. Is what you're saying, right?
Right.
But yeah, within that time frame, you wouldn't be a repeat.
So looking at the guys that are getting the the waivers, they can finish this year's crop, do next year's crop. They got a waiver, now you
You got a waiver for a specific thing. You got a waiver not to do it November 1, but you got to do it April 1st.
right.
Or,
So
you know,
April
you didn't
1st
get a
comes
waiver
and April 1st comes and I plant my crop next year.
No, I
Gee,
think
I'm in violation, $0 for 11
And you
months.
can still get a second crop in.
I wonder
Get
if
your
it doesn't
second
go
crop.
back to November 1 if you don't follow through on your waiver.
I don't know what the waiver says, so I can't say.
I don't know the answer to that either. I'd be soil and water.
No,
But that's a
but
good
that's the way
point,
I
though.
look at it.
But that's a good point though, because then you could get your third crop in and be like, well, okay, it's only X amount of dollars, I'm
Yeah.
out.
Now it's a monthly penalty
Right.
on the third crop.
I think it should be noted here that this is a very controversial law.
Oh,
And this is, some can look at this as a taking
So-
there's some issues here where it says, back on page,
Really, you should be up here talking into the microphone.
where it says it protects banks. Let's see here. First page here. Subdivision 2, on the, under 1B, stabilize soil, shores, and banks. Soils I could see, shores and banks, not so. A buffer will not stabilize a shore or a bank because it's also in this law that if you get flooded out, let's say it cuts out into your buffer that you've established, takes 50 feet of it out, that buffer gets moved over another 50 feet. So that's more or less admitting it doesn't stabilize banks.
Suppose the hope is that it will help, but whether or not it will, you know down at Red River.
Well, that's just it. It's poorly constructed. And this is just my opinion, but a lot of people share it.
Well, the fellow that did the presentation downstairs virtually said that this is gonna get challenged in court. I mean,
Right. Well, and I can understand slowing down the natural course of erosion. You get a gigantic flood and it takes it. It happened to us with the bike trail. When it got taken out, they said, oh, guess what? More of your land is getting used for the bike trail. So we had gotten that. And I think Eric's right. Are you flirting with almost imminent domain here? Like, you don't get a chance. I mean, there's really not giving you an option like, oh, we'll buy out. They didn't even give you the option to buy you
No,
out. It's just,
there's no
it's just
compensation
you're not,
at all.
Yeah,
They just-
you know.
yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting what next year will bring.
I'm just saying, you know, unless there's verbiage in the waiver, guys can go a couple of years anyways before there's any financial penalty to them. I mean, they get the notice and all that business, but I got a waiver. Now it starts here for my 11 months. I don't know what it says.
Yeah, the waivers are for very specific things, and we could research that more, but not everybody's gonna get a waiver.
We know what the county
Waiver is
does.
for, because there's also alternative practices
Yep.
that you could, so you might not need a 50-foot grass buffer. You could probably do an alternative practice, especially along the river. Most of the time, 98% of the time, that's the highest point in the whole field.
Yeah,
Water doesn't go uphill.
Yeah.
What's the point in buffering it? If you did no-till or cover crop or something different.
or even waterways in some places.
All water, where the inlets go, that's be grass, which most of them are already, so, I mean, it's all gonna be who's gonna do the work of enforcement and how they judge it.
Soil and water.
Yeah. But, I mean, $500 per day,
That counts up.
that'll add up.
That'll add up, yes.
And I just was wondering, Aaron, if you said the Board of Adjustment came up with this penalty phase, and ever since this was,
No. Who came up with the penalty phase?
Well, there's a
not
range.
Board of Adjustment, I'm sorry, the Bowser.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. No.
There, you come up with that?
I saw his head pop up.
I've been there that day.
The board of the Bowser is the one that came up with it, and it must have been just recently because I've been following this pretty close, and I could never get a answer in what this penalty was gonna be. But evidently, this is what they've come up with recently.
Yeah, I guess I think it was in the last couple months. And I think the range they're giving, you use the 500 per day. I think they're allowing counties to choose 300 to 500 or so. You could choose any number in between there.
So the county has some discretion in
Right,
that.
but they give us a range and we opt within a range. I was saying earlier that we opted for the higher end of those to try to encourage compliance, I guess, based on conversations with soil and water and within the county.
But that 500 per day is a repeat violator. Jeepers, you've gone through a lot before you get to that level.
Right. Well, basically it'd be 2 years.
500 is not a repeat, is it?
Yeah.
500 a day is a repeat, 500 a
Oh, a
month
day,
is
yeah,
the-
yeah, 500 a month, okay.
Yeah,
Yep,
the first
you're right.
180 days is 200, second 180 is 500 per month.
Yeah, per
Then
month.
it goes to 200 per day for the next 6 months.
Pretty steep.
If you're repeat though, you'd have, maybe, Bob was saying maybe you're continual the whole way.
Right.
In a continuation, not as a repeat. but
Especially if
just-
it's in court, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure how that would work. The fact that we're looking at returning to these next month.
And I can't believe they don't have to send you some notices here. I mean, like you're saying, they just send you one and you're done. I'm sure they have to send you more than one.
Yeah, on page 87, the APO, it specifies all the parts that have to be
Right.
contained within it. So I think any time that APO amount is changing, I would assume you'd have to get a different notice. Because you have to say the amount of the penalty to be imposed.
So you say Bowser's still working on this to some extent, huh?
I think the only county that's adopted this thus far is Fillmore that I'm aware of.
What is Bowser debating yet? What are they debating on this so far? Yeah, I mean,
Oh, in terms of what we're
Yeah.
proposing?
Yeah.
No, we've got a initial letter of approval from
this is approved
for
by
this.
Bowser.
Yeah, we could go ahead and do this, and then they want a copy of it. What I'd like to do, though, is send them another copy and say, this is our final document which we are going to approve, because I don't want them to say,
Okay.
here's a minor change, please make this.
So you're recommending this be our final copy that you send up to Bowser to approve?
Well, what I'll do is I could do some looking into some of the questions that came up tonight about how one becomes a repeat versus a continual violator, and we could return to it next month. I don't think we need to rush to adopt this. If it's very likely this is going to be litigated, we might let somebody else litigate it, perhaps.
Well, but
Good idea.
he said it won't be litigated until after November 1.
1st.
Right.
And it wouldn't be up until next spring probably that it ever got to court. By that time, we should have something.
We would. I guess what I'm saying is I don't know if we want to be in the first volley of folks to have this in our ordinance. We might just want to slow down a little bit. At first, I thought we were required to have it by September 1. I've since learned that
Yeah.
no counties except Fillmore are going to meet that, and there's not really any
I think-
pushback that I'm aware
In
of.
my personal opinion, I think you should wait in case there's some language changes too, which is very possible.
By the legislature?
Yeah.
Especially after the first trial or the first
No,
pushback.
but the deadline is November 1. I think we need to have something on the books by the time the program starts.
Probably. I mean, there'll probably be more clarity as we approach that date. So now we've got our public hearing advertised and started, and we can continue this hearing without as much advertisement as we did before. You know, we've said this is available on the website. We've said it's available in our office. So we could continue this twice, I think, and there wouldn't be any extra burden. If we wanted to do that, it would be an option.
And
So-
add, if it gets changed on the way to November, we
Yeah.
can add it before we're final.
If other things come to light and we want to tweak it a little bit, anytime we tweak it, we have to send it back up to Bowser, although, you know, their model says adopt it and then send it up. I still don't think that's the best way to do it. I think we want to have their approval before we actually adopt.
Well, I think we need to talk about it next month again.
Yeah.
Because at the end of September, it was the county board, 1st of October. Then you could have November 1st and not have anything on the books.
I know some counties are intending to be in that situation, but I don't know if we
Houston
want
County-
to.
I don't know that Houston County should do that.
I agree that we might not want to, but I don't think we want to
Yeah,
be first. Or not first, but second.
I think if you do your research, check on it, bring it back to our next meeting, then you can present, if, depending on how we vote, I guess it doesn't really matter, but present it to the county board, and then they can decide if they want to approve it or not too.
see, the thing is, we adopt it, we put it in the ordinance November 1st. the whole program starts, the whole program gets litigated. If a judge throws out the whole program, then it's thrown out. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right, I guess
but
I was-
it won't get litigated until after November 1st.
So if it gets thrown out, do you have to act and throw it out?
However the judge rules that you need to change it, or the program needs to change, we'd have to amend our ordinance to comply with the judge, or whatever the state decided, unless the state appealed it, but whatever the judge's final decision was, we'd have to amend to agree with that.
The case is that November 1st, you can start making notifications, or soil water can start making notifications that are people in violation if they don't have a waiver. It's 11 months before there's any financial ramifications, and in that 11 months, I anticipate that something probably will take place in the courts.
But I question that if we don't have something on the books by November 1, if we can even send out non-compliance notices.
Oh, no, I'm agreeing with you that we have to have it in place.
Yeah.
Because that's the deadline. But it's 11 months before there's actually
Yeah,
I
formal,
suspect
I mean,
also
there's a formal letter, but no action financial wise.
the resolution that we passed to opt in, I'm thinking it likely specified a date by which we would have it in our ordinance. So that might be binding us to have it by November 1.
okay.
You know, Bob, I'm curious how many people have thought of that loophole though. You could still plant another crop, say beans, get it out, and then quick throw it in grass right after and say, oh, I'm in compliance. There we go. No, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand why they're doing it. Goodwill. Hey, we're giving you the. But really, is that a loophole?
It's just an extension of time.
Well, we gotta try to work with.
So what's the only thing the county has discretion on? The penalty, amount?
Yeah, within a range there. I mean, really, we don't have to use their model ordinance. They have to approve any ordinance we adopt. So we could try to write this thing from scratch if we wanted to, rather than do
Hey, I'm
that.
for that.
Yeah,
Good idea.
We can be more restrictive, not less.
yeah. I mean, that said, we have to approve anything we adopt.
So Soil and Water recommended the higher levy on fines?
Yeah, really, our discretion is the amount of the fines and what form of enforcement we want to take, criminal or APO. Or both.
All of this said, we're gonna wait until the next meeting to
Let's table,
make
I
our
would
final
recommend table.
decision. We'll table that as well.
I suspect so, yeah.
Any other business to bring before the commission?
I just have one question on, this probably is not that big a deal, but we were talking about out there, Charlie Ray's, about, when do you require variance and when don't you for a feedlot? I don't know if that's something at some point we wanna talk about as a group, not tonight, but that issue came up because
What's the
it's
issue?
under 50 head, does he need to have a variance? Because we don't require him to register. Do we need to require him to have a variance? It's under 50 animal units. Or do you want to just leave it
A variance with regard to residential
moving
distance?
the feedlot closer to a residence?
I think a
somebody
feedlot's
has
a
a-
feedlot.
Pardon me?
A feedlot is a feedlot, doesn't matter how many head, or how
We
many
don't-
animal
We may
units.
not even know the feedlot exists because there's no requirement for him to register.
Because it's less than,
If he's less than 50, he could be out there with a couple head of sheep and we don't even know it.
What's less than 50? Why do you need to know it?
Right.
Because
I'm
it's
saying-
within the distance of setback to a,
If he
to a
wants to
residential
build a
property.
feedlot next to, say, if he wants to fatten 500, forget that name I mentioned. It's got nothing to do with that name I mentioned. Forget, strike that. If I wanted to have 300 head of sheep, 200 feet from my neighbor's house, that's under 50 animal units.
That's legal.
Yeah, right. But my question is, we don't have any language in there to say, at what point do you need a variance? Should we put it in there that if you have 50 animal units or more, you need to get a variance? Do we need to tie that down more, or?
Well, yeah. if it would be
What does it
50 or
say?
more.
What does it say as far as setback?
This is feedlot, doesn't say registered feedlot. So feedlot is anywhere where permanent vegetation doesn't maintain, or anytime you put an animal in a building. So the chicken coop next to the courthouse is a feedlot. Yeah.
So if we have 10
We
chickens
are
over
addressing
here,
that.
we want 10 chickens, we gotta get a variance, you know, I mean, somewhere we maybe should tie that down. Probably enough discussion for tonight, but
Right.
I think down the road, we need to maybe look at that.
I guess from my perspective, though, when it talks about the setback for a feedlot, that setback requirement does not say 50 animals or more, right?
Right, so what about the person with 10 chickens, is that a feedlot?
Technically, yeah.
Same question if you have a storage building under 400 square feet. You don't need a permit, right?
No,
Do they have a setback for that?
200 square feet.
Or 200 square feet?
yeah,
that
setbacks
would count.
There's still a setback.
Is there a setback for it? You don't know it's there.
Right, I mean, they should adhere to it, but we don't approve where it goes, so.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing this out for people to think about, we need to discuss it if we want to tie it down.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't find out if there was a complaint.
Yeah, that's about it.
What's that? I move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second
And a
it.
motion and a second to adjourn. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.